Well, good day and welcome to you. It is July the 19th, and wherever you are, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Now, if you're new to this channel, my name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome you. If you have listened to a video or two before in the past, well, I want to welcome you back. Now, if you have listened to some videos before, if you could just bear with me for just a minute or so, I want to briefly tell those who are hearing this information for the first time about what we talk about. We talk about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. We take a deeper look at who and what the Masters are, why are they coming back now, why is it important that they do so at this particular time, and of course, what does it mean for you and everyone else that they're doing this. Now, if you're new to this information, or even for those who have heard this information before, it might be assumed that this is of a religious nature. Well, I don't really look at it like that. I believe personally that this information transcends religion. It transcends the political issues that are going on today, the economic issues, the ecological problems even, because it has to do with the oneness of humanity. Now, I'm not presenting this information really even to change your religious view. It is my hope. I have two hopes, actually. One is that you listen to this information and want to take it a step or two further and start to investigate this information for yourself. Perhaps look at some of the links that I put in the description of these videos to get some more background information about this. Hopefully you'll do it. And then look at it and see if there's truth in it for yourself or not. Ideally, the goal, I guess, would be that you would do something about it and start to help SOP save our planet. So you can do that whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, atheist, agnostic, whatever, Scientologist even. And you can do whatever you can do to help SOP save our planet and still, stay whatever belief you think you want to believe in. So it's not my intention to get you to change your beliefs. So that's the reason why I like to tell this in the beginning, so that you don't automatically assume what so many people assume, and thinking that I'm just trying to steer you away from your beliefs on anything. Okay, so hopefully I got my point across with that. Now, I do want to say this. For those of us who have asked questions, I really want to thank you for that, because it always helps us to understand more about this information. And of course, if you have a question after after doing some information, doing your own background research, or even if you've heard this information before, you have a question, I can try to answer it. I don't claim to know the answer to every question, but I do give it a good college try. You can do that by posting your question as a comment. You can also put comments up. I sometimes address those as well. You can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. But I do think the best way to know more about this information is to go to some of those links, like the Share International site. That has probably the best information at one source. So anyway, hopefully you'll take advantage of that. It doesn't cost you anything, just perhaps a little bit of time, but to do that. Now, I do have some questions to cover in this video, but if you don't mind, those who have asked questions, if you could just be patient, I want to talk about something first before we get into that, because of the calendar day that I'm doing this video, which is July 19th, and the importance and how and why it relates to this information. Okay, so the comment that kind of goes along with this comes from Orca Azure. Okay, so I'll read this comment and kind of talk about why I'm reading the comment based on today being July 19th. So it says, with all respect, but obviously you don't know the Bible, because the second coming will be more spectacular. Read the New Testament. Well, I have read the New Testament. I'm not saying I'm a biblical scholar, but, I do my best to try to intuit the truth in it for myself. I might interpret it differently than you, but that's pretty much everybody now, isn't it? And now I want to say this. I want to give my opinion about the bookends in the Bible, Genesis and, of course, Revelation, how it relates to today, and then give some background information about the emergence of the teacher and the reappearance of the Christ, or the Imamati, the coming of the Kalki Avatar, or the Messiah, however you want to look at it. Okay, so my personal opinion about the bookends of the Bible, Genesis and Revelation. Just like with every other part of the Bible, there's a lot of misinterpretations of the Bible itself. There's also a lot of distortions in that. Now, I think the biggest misinterpretation of the bookends of the Bible is the time frame. Just like with the creationism and where people look at it and read it literally and say, well, it says in the Bible that God created the heavens and the earth and everything in between in 7 calendar days, so therefore he created it in 1 week. That's it. Case closed. Even though science has proved without a shadow of a doubt that that is probably not the case, people deny that and say, nope, if it's in the Bible, that's it. Well, perhaps, just perhaps, whoever wrote Genesis, I think it was Moses, was trying to explain creationism to people that didn't understand math, history, time in that way, and even if you look at it, the mathematical terms that we use today, that, billions, trillions, those didn't exist even 100 years ago. And if you read literature from early 1900s even, they refer to a billion as 1,000 million. It wasn't until just a few decades ago that it became an accepted term of billions and people understood really what it meant. So to think that 5,000 years ago when Moses or whoever wrote Genesis, who was trying to explain the origins and the creation of the universe, could have explained it in a scientific way and people have gotten it, I think it's just naive. I think they were explaining it to people who didn't understand really life itself, and they just wanted to know something. And he explained it in a story with symbology. People perhaps got a little bit of the truth of it. And then over time, just like with Revelation, people put stuff in, took stuff out, put stuff in, took stuff out. And where we have people today denying even what their science is telling them, because the Bible says something different than what they think they're saying, something different than what science is really trying to say. And I think that science is denying the fact that there is a intelligence behind creation. It just happened automatically, where I think that's where creationists have gotten it right. So I think they both have something right and they both have something wrong. It's just there's no meeting of the minds, for instance. Now, to get it to this story and how Revelation fits into all that, I think it's the same problem. People view the symbology that John wrote in there about the second coming as something that is happening to only them. And this isn't unique to our time. There were people centuries ago that thought the same thing, that the end times were during their times and so forth. And, even to this day, my whole life, anytime the sky turned a weird color, oh my God, that's it. This is it. This is exactly what the Bible said. And, and so forth, when it was just people just kind of interpreting it. But I think John was speaking about a time frame much broader and much longer than most people give him credit, and perhaps a few thousand years. And he was speaking about his own time, with Nero being one of the beasts in the Bible, to, 70, 80 years ago with World War I and World War II and the Axis powers and the release of that energy that people are assuming is an individual. They call them the Antichrist, but it's an energy. And even thousands of years from now. Now, the reason is, and this kind of addresses your comment, is the second coming is really not a religious thing, and it's broader than that. It's broader than just the Christ coming back from the Christians, because there are other religions that are expecting a teacher to come back in their own way. They've misinterpreted that as well. Like there's Buddhists that think that the fifth Buddha, Maitreya, will come back 500,000 years from now, and are convinced of that. But yet that was just symbology too. So it's broader than just the Christians and the Christ coming back for them, because I think the teacher's coming back for the whole world. And then it's broader than that, because it's not even about just the teacher coming back. It's about the externalization of the spiritual hierarchy on this planet, coming back into the everyday world after being eons and eons and eons of living and retreating away from the public eye and teaching humanity indirectly the way they've done for eons. And now finally coming back into the world after being long forgotten, but yet did it at a long time ago. They were teaching humanity directly, but since then have been really forgotten by all of us. And then it's even broader than that, because it has to do with the awakening of the hearts and minds of humanity, and the realization that we are one, and starting to solve our problems that we've been plagued with for eons in the same way. Getting rid of competition, greed, fear with one another and so forth, starting to live more to the truth that we are one. So really, as far as I see, in terms of reading the Bible, that Jesus even fit into the reappearance of the Christ. I know most Christians would disagree with that. They'd say, well, he was the Christ, and that's your view or whatever like that. Like I said, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just sharing a different side of it. But esoterically, the Christ is not an individual per se. The Christ is a function within the hierarchy of these masters. Now, what is the hierarchy, the spiritual hierarchy on this planet? Well, all of life is a hierarchy, really. You know, it's laid down by the foundation of the mineral kingdom. And then above that is the plant kingdom. And then out of the plant kingdom comes the animal kingdom. And then out of the animal kingdom comes the human kingdom. And out of the human kingdom comes the spiritual kingdom. Because humanity's kind of in between. We're not quite animal, but yet we're not quite purely divine like these masters are. We're somewhere in the middle. We're the middle of the road. But humanity is starting to gently, quietly, over eons and eons and eons, starting to realize that we are divine. You know, and a few of us have realized the truth of that, started to live their life moment to moment like that, and have mastered what it means to be divine, and they move out of the human kingdom into the spiritual kingdom. But it's a process. It takes lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes to get to there. So these masters were men and women who went ahead of us in evolution and have finished what we are still learning. Some of them have chosen to stay here. Now, these masters have not worked in front of the public for eons, but they knew at some point they would have to come back. And that's where we kind of get to what's going on to today. Now, where does July 19th fit into that, and why was I talking about that in the beginning? Well, after eons and eons and eons of these masters working in the way that they did indirectly through the disciples of the world, like Jesus, who's now one of the masters of wisdom, and any man or woman who made any kind of impact in society, whether we knew them and they were famous and became known for what they did or not, worked with one of these masters either consciously or unconsciously to help bring about some of the plan of God within humanity. Now, it was hoped that and this was not even that long ago, it was hoped that these masters would come back in about 1,200 years, that then humanity would be ready for them to come back. Well, things had to speed up because these masters started to see the very distinct possibility that if they didn't come back and help, this is the reason why it's important that they're coming back at this time, like I always say, that humanity would destroy itself, because we had invented the atomic bomb, things were getting more competitive, there was the Cold War going on and so forth, and there was a couple times where if it wasn't for the help of these masters indirectly, we would have destroyed ourselves. With the the Cuban Missile Crisis is a good example. The Berlin Wall coming up were two examples where we almost destroyed ourselves. So if it wasn't for their help and the help of these space brothers, that would have happened. Now you look at the ecological issue, that if it's not for them helping to wake us up to the problems of the ecological issue, we're going to become extinct in the same way. So that's why they're coming back now. That's why it's important that they're doing this. But they had to kind of hasten their return. Now, a few years, I don't know exact date, but a few years before July 19th, 1977, when Maitreya entered London, 5 masters left their ancient retreats and slipped into into 5 major cities and started to live amongst the population of these cities. There wasn't any fanfare. Nobody in those cities knows who they are really, and they won't be acknowledged as who they are as one of the masters of wisdom until after Maitreya has declared himself on the day of declaration. But the first one went into New York and is living somewhere in the outskirts of New York. The second one then slipped into London, separate from Maitreya, even though Maitreya is in London too. One went into Geneva in Switzerland. The next one went into Darjeeling, which, if you're not familiar with your geography, because I had to look this one up when I first heard it, known for their tea, is a small little town in the southern part of the Himalayas. and very remote, but yet one of the planetary centers. And then the last one was Tokyo. And then the master went into Tokyo, has been living in Tokyo. And that particular master, out of the five, has been the most active in terms of appearances amongst people, but has been living in that city too. And then not long after that, the master who was Jesus, the master Jesus, went from Syria and entered Rome. And then one went into Moscow. And then since then, other masters have slipped into other cities. But then, after those seven, Maitreya, a few days before July 19th, 1977, left his ancient retreat and went into the plains of Pakistan to acclimatize his body, stayed there for some days, and then took a flight and went from Pakistan and flew into London. Now, a couple things about that. He did that in order to fulfill the man-made prophecy that the Christ would come back from the clouds. That was written in there by somebody. I don't know who exactly, but it apparently was not written in there by John. Somebody put it in there. They thought it was a great idea to talk about. He did it in order to fulfill that prophecy. He didn't have to fly from a plane. He could have thought himself from Pakistan to anywhere in the world at any time, instantly, but he flew in there. And then the other thing I always think about, which is just my monkey mind thinking about this, was he an aisle guy, or was he more of a selfless person and sat in the middle? I always wondered that question. Or did he, that kind of thing. Did he like to stretch his legs when he flew that 20-hour flight or whatever it was from Pakistan to London? Just kidding. Anyway, I digress. But then he slipped into London and lived in the Asian community of London for since 1977. And then, according to Benjamin Creme, he started making television appearances somewhere around January of 2010, and has since been doing interviews in Europe, United States, Australia, Asia, and other places, in Russia, for instance, but not claiming to be anything but just an ordinary person. But even to today, he's still doing interviews. He's still, discussing things on television. It's just nobody's recognized him as Maitreya. You got to understand, for those who have followed this information for a long time and are quite concerned or starting to doubt whether he's on TV, Maitreya, as with any of these masters, they can tell you truths without you realizing that they're telling you the truth, or the truth of things. And so he doesn't have to explain things the way that you would think that he would explain things in order to get the truth out there. It's up for us to recognize him. And I do know people who have recognized him on TV, or at least claim to have recognized him on TV. So it's not that, nobody has recognized him. I think people have seen him. You might have seen him. You might not have even recognized him. And I do think that when we start to recognize him, he will have been a familiar face for some time for most of us. But that's just my personal opinion. But anyway, so since then, he's been trying to wake humanity up to the problems. That's why we have to do it ourselves. So it's very important that we look at it like that. So that's where July 19th, 1977 fits into that. Right now, for most of us, especially those of us who lived during that time, it was not a day that really mattered to most people, but yet it was a day that the one awaited by all the world's religions entered the world, and even though most people would expect it to be with this fanfare and this spectacular whatever vision they have of the Christ coming back, the Christ's MO has always been on the ground, very pragmatic, and not with a lot of fanfare. Just go back and read your history of Jesus. He worked in the exact same way. So hopefully that helps. Now, to get on to some of the other comments and questions, there were two comments that people wrote about the last video I put up. It is priority number 1, the environment, where we talked about the environment. And hopefully, if you're new to this information, you'll go back and listen to that video, because this is really what we all need to be looking at about SOP saving our planet, in terms of the environment. But I read an article from Benjamin Creme's master talking about invisible peril, about the radiation coming from nuclear power plants, and how even though our scientists don't see it, we don't see the pollution, we don't taste the pollution in our food, we don't smell it, we can't, like I said, we can't see it, can't touch it, Therefore, it must not be there. According to these masters, the pollution that we can't see is the most dangerous pollution and dangerous thing that we're doing to not only ourselves, we're doing to the animal kingdom and the lower kingdoms, but also to the planet itself. So we eventually will have to shut down those reactors in the way that we're doing. So, but this person was talking, and the next person were talking about pollution that's bad, but it's not quite as bad but it's pollution that we can see. And first one comes from Ben Fitz. It's not our fault that all industries wrap their things in plastic. I couldn't agree more. I can't stand the way they process things, they package things like that. The change has to begin with industries. If they don't change, that doesn't matter. If we stop using plastic or fossil fuels, we have a change that is not us. Okay, and then the next person said something about, where is it? People overlook that airplanes are polluting our air that we breathe, not just radiation. And that's true. I mean, I agree with that. But that still kind of falls in the category of pollution that we can see. You know, as bad as both of those things are, and I couldn't agree more, I'm not disagreeing with it. It's not an either or, it's an and. You know what I'm saying? And there's more pollution that we can see that we're doing too, right? But you've picked a couple of them. But it's still, according to Ben's master, pales in comparison to the damage that we're doing to ourselves and the hazards how hazardous it is, because the radiation is affecting the etheric, which is one of the 4 levels of physicality above gas. And we owe our health to our etheric body. We would think it's just our physical body. So every disease that we ever get always comes from the etheric. And so when radiation permeates our etheric vehicles and the etheric bodies, it causes our immune system and our physical body to drop, which causes the disease, which could eventually kill us if it hasn't done it already. So that's why it's so important that we stop it. And the sad thing is that if it wasn't for commercialization, we would be doing a safer way of processing the power of the atom through nuclear fusion or is it fission rather than fusion? I can't remember which one it is. I always forget the terms. But anyway, one uses water, the other one uses plutonium or uranium even. So that's the reason why we have the technology now to use water in processing the atom. That could be clean and safe and cold, and it doesn't affect the environment in that way, and it doesn't cause radiation. Now, the one thing that I do want to say, because in the article that I read, at the very end of it, if you listen to it all the way through, Ben's master said something about the work of the Space Brothers. If it wasn't for the work of the Space Brothers, this Earth would be in a very, very sorry shape, really bad. And if you follow UFO activity, right, and that's something that interests you, and you perhaps listen to the History Channel, I've noticed this many times when I watch, programs about UFOs and, those kind of things, UFO sightings. They oftentimes talk about UFOs and the number of sightings that appear around nuclear vessels in the military, like nuclear ships and so forth, nuclear silos, and nuclear reactors. And oftentimes they also say, right on the heels of that, they must be trying to assess our technology. No, they're actually trying to clean up the pollution. And so they've worked these are space brothers from Venus and from Mars mainly, but from some of the other higher planets, have been here for the last few decades since we've started using that technology, cleaning up as much as they can within karmic limits, tirelessly working moment to moment. And if it wasn't for their work, we'd all be probably near death or dead. And we owe them a great debt. And eventually we will hopefully, I hate to say it like that, but it's still not happened yet, but eventually we will learn to not do that. And then they won't have to work quite as hard. I'm sure they're like, man, well, these people wake up, these people are morons. Anyway, but it's going to take us waking up to the problems of the world. And that's why Maitreya is already starting to speak on TV, already starting to wake us up gently, quietly to the problems of not only the environment, but to some of the other problems. But here's the thing too, and I don't mean to nag you, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse if you've heard these videos before. It all starts with the principle of sharing. We have to start doing that first. If you're interested in saving the environment, and that's something that deeply concerns you, and I hope it does, I hope you look at why sharing is so important because it's going to help nations start to trust one another. And it doesn't have to be a perfect peace, but they have to have more of a goodwill relationship with one another in order to solve the problems in the environment. That's why Maitreya says it, and even Ben's master said it starts with the principle of sharing. There's no other way. We can't solve the environmental problem until we start sharing, the resources of the world. It seems kind of counterproductive or counterintuitive, but it really isn't. As Maitreya says, without sharing, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. And without peace, there could be no future. And that future also is the reason why he's saying that too, is because without sharing, there will be no environment left. So, that's the reason why it's so important. So I don't mean to nag anybody, but it is hands down the most important thing that we need to be educating ourselves on right now and starting to do. And then when the time comes and our leaders in whatever nation start discussing it, it's time for us to look and raise our voice to them and say, yes, we need to share the resources. This is the only thing that's going to get the problems solved. And so, because we have to start seeing ourselves as one, and it starts with the principle of sharing. That's actually the starting of the manifestation of unity on this planet, is sharing, really. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, the next comment, and then I'll read the last one. What do you or Maitreya think about the corona vaccine? Well, I can't speak for Maitreya, so I don't have Maitreya's number, and he doesn't work telepathically through me like he did with Ben, so I can't speak for him. I can only speak for myself. Have you gotten your jab? Yes, I'm fully vaccinated. What do I think about it? I think it's a no-brainer, to be honest. I'm not one to go get vaccines every year, the flu. I have seen it. I've had friends who've died from from COVID. And so therefore I see how serious it is. And if I can do my part and help stop it so somebody else doesn't get it, then I have no problem with it. I've had both vaccines. I had just a little bit of achiness in my arm the first time. The second time I didn't feel hardly anything. And it didn't change my DNA. I didn't get COVID. I didn't start turning into a lizard. Nothing. I mean, it's just a bunch of hooey. You know what I'm saying? It's just, but I don't think the government should force people to get a vaccine. I think you should have the right to do whatever you do, but that's just me. But people make such a big deal out of nothing. And that's just my opinion of it. All right. Now, where is it? The last one comes from Benjamin. He says, I care, I think. Okay. But why should anyone care? Why does it matter? It's like a frog slowly boiling to death. Humans can probably invent something ungodly to avoid the effect of their previous sin and prolong their evil ways. Does that mean everything is okay? I don't really understand what that means. And he says, you're kind of preaching to the choir here, but how can you achieve any change if you cannot convince anyone about anything? We are all one. To most people, this is meaningless. People must fear for their own souls. What does planetary destruction matter if they are dead? Okay. And not here to witness it. Okay. The planet will be fine and heal when humans are extinct. Oh, God, I hope not. It's the human souls we should worry about. Harming others harms the soul. Okay. First of all, how can you achieve any change if you cannot convince anyone about anything? I'm assuming you're just meaning you in a general sense and not me personally. Well, like I say in nearly every video, I just present this information for you to look at and for you to consider. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, and you shouldn't try to convince anybody of anything too. Just tell them about it. Just tell them what your concerns are. Help wake humanity up in your own way. If you believe even in the slightest little bit that sharing could bring about justice and bring about peace, make your voice known. When the time comes, when our world leaders need to vote on whether we should do it or not, call your representative and tell them, I think we should try it. At least try it. Why not? Everything else we're doing is not working. Why not try something new? I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. It doesn't hurt anything. It's not going to bring out any evil and communism and totalitarianistic type of socialism, because it didn't 75 years ago when they did it with the Marshall Plan. So why would it do it now? So just try it and see. And why should you care? Because we are one. And it doesn't matter if people don't understand that now. They will eventually, because it's true. Maitreya says it. It's within the hearts of all of us that we are one. And if you are starting to sense that and wake up to it, you can't just sit back in your hands and do nothing. That's complacency. That's where nothing's getting done. What else do you got to do? Choose to help out a little bit or a lot. It's up to you to do. We're all here to help save the planet in our own way. It's for each one of us to do it. Maitreya is like the sharks. They can't solve the problem. We have to solve the problem because we're the ones creating the problem, or we'll never learn. And so Maitreya is just here to kind of point the way, to kind of elucidate the problem and give a simple solution to the problem, like he did, and it's going to take more than just telling people one time, but the thing about Maitreya, now, in terms of convincing people or whatever, is I don't think any one of us understand how powerful his love is. And even with him being unknown and unrecognized by people, it affects you. Fear and joy are equally infectious. It might not happen right away. It might not be something that you see right away, but over time it starts to wake you up to the problems. It did it for me. When I first heard about this information, I didn't give a crap. You know what I'm saying? Didn't feel like it was my job to change anything. Didn't think even if I did, I could. And now look at me. I'm not doing much, but I'm doing something, And so it just takes time for a lot of us. We're not educated in that way, But over time, we'll see how powerful his love is. And this is any one of these masters. And if you've listened to it this far, hopefully you have, I am inviting a guest speaker in a video that I'm going to record this week. His name is Dick Larson, and he talks about the 5 ways to recognize whether you had a master experience. And hopefully you'll listen to this video. I mean, he told me this on the phone. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to put up the video, but we're going to do it this week. But he said something that I noticed every single time I saw Maitreya. There was this joy that came over me. I couldn't explain it. It was just, I felt so joyful. Like even the times that I felt stressed, and that was somebody else put that in there about how change only starts from within, right? Somebody just commented about that. So only real change comes from within. When Maitreya said to me some years ago in a very stressful time of my life, peace always comes from within, and he left, I mean, I felt so joyful that day, and then the next day, and eventually it kind of waned, but I had to kind of remind myself about what he said and tried and meditated on it, but it changed me. And it's the power of the love of God embodied in an individual. We have no idea what that does to us, because the love that's emanating from his heart is already within our hearts. See, he's not trying to convince you of anything. He's just trying to wake you up to what you already in your heart, you see? So that's where I think maybe our cynicism is there's no truth to it. And then the other thing too is, and I meant to copy this down. I'm gonna have to read this. Hopefully, Ben, you'll listen to. Maybe I can talk about it in the next video. But if you go down and look at the links, there's a link that I put in there about George Adamski Foundation, and George Adamski claimed to have had contact with some of the space brothers, and he asked one of them, who was this space brother, his name was Furkan, who he viewed as a master of these, whatever planet he was from, just like we would look at our masters. Right now we just have a handful of masters, right? But on the higher planets, there might be, 1 million or 2 million or 3 million of these masters from their point of view, right? And eventually there'll be that many on our planet, if not more. But so he said that the people in the spaceship looked up to this one as like their mentor or their elder brother. And he asked him, he goes, "Do you ever get discouraged?" And Furkan said to him, he goes, "We don't know that term." And he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, that's a negative term." He goes, "We only see the failure of yesterday with the potential success of the future." He goes, "We don't know what discouragement is." And if you asked Maitreya, "Will you ever be discouraged?" No. Even when you just think there's no way, you have no faith in humanity, Maitreya has complete faith that we're going to get through this. He knows for certain that as he says, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. So there's hope, and even though it doesn't look like it, there's hope. And I forget it from time to time too, but there's hope, right? You don't have to be so downhearted about your fellow brothers. It's just the phase that we're going through right now. But we will all get through this together, because we will realize that if we don't, we will all perish together. And that's the thing. So hopefully we'll take the time to investigate this information for ourselves, but at the same time see that there's hope for humanity. So everybody take care. Thanks for listening, and you have a great day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.